Since 1989, the security environment has changed immeasurably. And just as important, it continues to change. We face a range of new challenges to the security and the values of the 26 NATO nations. To meet these challenges effectively, the old NATO simply would not do. We need a new NATO. A NATO with modern military capabilities, an alliance able to project stability where and when required.
No longer concerned with the bipolar threat of the Cold War, today NATO is outwardly focused on an entirely new global security environment where stability in one part of the world can have consequences worldwide. This has meant undertaking entirely new types of missions, from peacekeeping in the Balkans to humanitarian missions in response to natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina or the Pakistan earthquake, to combat operations in Afghanistan. In this new environment, NATO no longer finds itself only to the left of the continuum from war to peace, but also increasingly to the middle and right, where the role of military force diminishes and the need for cooperation between military and non-military actors increases. NATO's military arm is adopting this cooperation before and during crises as part of an effects-based, or more broadly, comprehensive approach to planning.
The comprehensive approach is about bringing all of the elements of national or alliance power together to achieve an objective. Now, as a military man, I speak mostly in terms of military missions and military objectives, but it can be everywhere from humanitarian relief all the way up through military or major combat operations and anything in between, which might be irregular warfare or stabilization and reconstruction. And just by the titles of those things, it ought to be clear that the military is not the only element that you need. You need diplomatic, you need civil, and you need economic elements to be able to achieve success in whatever the mission happens to be.
Well, it's obvious that for almost any intervention, if you want to call it that, in a given country, military operations by themselves are not enough, and certainly what we have come to call kinetic operations are virtually never enough if you're trying to help resolve a civil conflict or help rebuild a society.
I guess you could say there's really nothing new about this. Since time immemorial, the military has worked with the civilian authorities, with non-governmental organizations, and with economic organizations. I think what's different here is going to plan ahead before time, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so that we don't have to go into it in an ad hoc situation, so that we really do know what each of us is going to do and how we can help each other in accomplishing our joint task.
For military planners, the comprehensive approach begins with an initial desired end state as defined by NATO's political leadership. Working in concert with the alliance's non-military instruments, political, civil, and economic, military planners identify the goals or effects that will lead to the politically defined end state. To the degree possible, planners act in concert with other international and regional actors.
Well, I think NATO's shown with its deployment to Afghanistan that it could encounter 3/4 of the potential actors on the face of the earth in terms of geographic scope and likely wartime scenarios.
I think better coordination, or at least more dialogue between the different interveners, is certainly something that we welcome and that we also work towards as the International Committee of the Red Cross. I think what we will not achieve, and what we certainly don't want to achieve, is a fully integrated approach. It's something where we become part of a larger political agenda, because that will make it impossible for us to do our work.
NATO doesn't expect the other actors to agree with objectives and end states going into a crisis. Rather, what we're looking for is for those parties and those actors for whom we have tremendous respect to work with us in resolving problems of coordinations and process beforehand, so that when we go into a crisis, we're focusing 100% of our efforts on that crisis and not on process.
I think my message to NATO senior decision makers would be that talking is a very good thing, and talking and understanding each other's mandates and objectives is absolutely central for success, for our success, but probably also for yours. And I think what has to be understood despite this is that our objectives are not necessarily identical, but that sometimes we can have synergy of objectives, that sometimes we want the same thing for different reasons, which doesn't mean that we wear the same T-shirt, but it certainly makes it worth talking to each other.
We have many more non-governmental organizations that operate around the world today. So in the environment we operate in Afghanistan, we don't even know how many NGOs are out there, some 2,000 to 3,000 I've heard. They all impact what we do as we operate militarily. And we have to have the ability to engage with them in many cases where they don't want to engage with us. But the importance of being able to pass information and coordinate operations, I think, is obvious. And we'd like very much to be able to include that in the planning process before this ever occurs, so that we don't force them into a situation where they're not able to accomplish their mission, or we're not able to accomplish our mission.
NATO's military arm understands that the new global security environment is complex, with diverse actors who may or may not agree with the alliance's end state or all of its objectives. But NATO does not expect consensus, nor does it desire to take the lead. Its military leaders simply contend that better harmonization of military and non-military efforts before and during a crisis is critical to success.